The Sixth Waking Up class, November 28, 1999. Good afternoon. Good to see you all again. The topic today is healing, and therefore the topic is supply, and therefore the topic is protective work, because they're all exactly the same thing. I want to do this class a little different than we've been doing before. I want it to be much more of a workshop format to the extent that that happens. I don't want to talk for 30 minutes and then come back and field a few questions or something like that. Please interrupt or ask questions at any point during this situation, or share experiences, or bring points up that will clarify it, or bring points up that you want clarified. I've been getting quite a bit of clarity on the principles behind healing over the past couple of weeks. A bunch of stuff has been coming to me, and there are really just three very fundamental principles that we need to grasp to understand healing. And what we're going to do this class is go through them and go through those three principles, which we've heard about already in the previous 5 classes of this course, and of all the other classes that have been done here and everywhere else. These are not secret principles, but we need to understand them. And I want to say one other thing that's become very clear to me, really over the past couple of years, but especially over the past couple of weeks, and that is the purpose of healing. And the purpose of healing has nothing to do with the, shall we call it, the client. The purpose of healing, Joel always talks about healing is not the main point of infinite way work, and it's not. Healing is just a subsidiary, and for a lot of people, healing was the carrot. Joel was an amazing healer and healed 80% of the cases that claims that came to him, and healed 125 people a day, and people who had a few healings through his consciousness would become curious as to what this was all about and would become students. So in that sense, it was a carrot for Joel's students, and that was why healing has become was for him an important part of infinite way work. But my discovery, easy for Joel. Joel was struck with the ability to heal and didn't have to work to gain that ability or to gain that consciousness. He had to work with it a great deal, but he was given the consciousness and given the ability to heal and all that at one fell swoop. For those of us who haven't had that flash of light type experience, we have to work to gain the healing consciousness. Or we have to work to gain the supply consciousness. Or we have to work to gain protective work consciousness. And the fact is that in order for our lives to work, we have to gain the consciousness. And that's what this is all about, is gaining the consciousness. And healing is a perfectly good excuse to work on gaining the consciousness. You can't heal without the consciousness. You won't have supply and uninterrupted supply without the consciousness. You won't be able to do protective work without the consciousness. And so it's really all about gaining the consciousness. And healing, in my experience now, healing work in my experience, is primarily for the practitioner, not so much for the client. If you were to have a client who asked for a healing and you gave them a healing and nothing else, you didn't transmit consciousness to them or give them a teaching or give them some instruction or raise their understanding, you might as well have given them an aspirin. I mean, either case would have resulted in that particular symptom being fixed. And So there's no real advantage in spiritual healing over medical healing as far as removing symptoms. The point is all about consciousness and all about realization, and you will not, it's not, let's not get black and white about it, but to the extent that you have this realization that we're talking about, your life will work, and to the extent that you don't, you will be in a crapshoot. You'll be in the statistics of whether you'll catch this epidemic or this bout of flu or this stock market crash will catch you because you're in the wrong stocks, or this bank failure. Life is either infinitely abundant or it's a crapshoot. And the consciousness makes it infinitely abundant. So that's what healing work is all about. And much as I would like, the other thing I've learned over this class is that I was talking to Tulsi earlier, I'd really like to sit here and just tell stories like Robert did or like Bhagwan did, and just share the consciousness and sit here and stuff. And I keep getting drugged back to teaching infinite way principles. And there's no conflict between Robert and infinite way principles, but the infinite way principles are how you build the consciousness, how you develop the muscles, how you do the work. And it's very easy, and Robert warns about this, it's very easy to listen to someone like Robert and get sort of glassy-eyed and tell yourself that everything is nothing, and live a life of pain and misery, telling yourself this is nothing, and yet your experience is pain and misery. And that's not the point. We want the experience to be joy and bliss. And that's done through the realization of of these principles that we're going to discuss. And they can be, some people do get that by sitting next to a guru like Robert. Being in that consciousness is bound to lift you there eventually. But since Robert's not sitting here, we can go to the gym and do it the hard way, get on the equipment and start doing curls. So that's what it's all about. Okay, the first principle, and I'm back to my old, it all kept given to me to be written down, so I've written this stuff down. I'll have these to hand out eventually, but not today, because I know this isn't complete, and I will add to it whatever else comes through during this class and the next class if we have it. But the first principle is the mystical principle, the foundation of mysticism. As far as I'm concerned, the only mystical principle. I'm sure you can list lots of other mystical principles, but they're all the same. The principle is that God constitutes individual consciousness. God, which is consciousness, constitutes individual consciousness. And by individual consciousness, I mean my consciousness and your consciousness. This consciousness, the consciousness that I am being conscious with right now, the consciousness that you are being conscious with right now, the consciousness that you're hearing me with and accepting this with or poo-pooing it with or whatever you're doing with it, that consciousness is God. Is God consciousness is God. And this is the pearl without price, the realization that when it's had makes everything else nonsense. Having had this realization, nothing else matters. And then it's a free ride from there on. So that's the basic premise, is that God constitutes individual consciousness. The three premises, when put together, lead to the healing principles, so that's why we're going over them very carefully. I want, how to say it, this has been brought up before, but God is not, it's not like I have a piece of God consciousness and you have a piece of God consciousness. It's not like God chopped himself up into 5 billion parts and each of us has a 5 billionth. The spiritual things, consciousness doesn't divide. The fact is, all of God consciousness is available right here where I sit and right there where you sit. All of God consciousness is available. And let's think about what that means. The realization of this stuff is also the consciousness which results in healing, by the way, so that's why we're laboring on this. The nature of God, and therefore of God consciousness, the two are synonymous. God and God consciousness are exactly the same thing. God is consciousness, the consciousness. The nature of God is omnipotence, the only power. There are no other powers. Omniscience, all knowledge. Now, what does that mean? First of all, let's take them one at a time. From my position here, that means that there is no other power except the God power, which is in me. Okay, so there's no power out there that can attack me or approach me or do anything to me except if I believe in it. God is omniscient. God is my consciousness. Hence, I cannot be limited by lack of information, by lack of experience, by lack of education. I can't be limited by lack of any intellectual thing because God is omniscience. God consciousness is all of knowledge. All the knowledge that's been revealed and all the knowledge that hasn't yet been revealed, all the things which haven't yet been discovered are right now present in God and therefore in me, and it's all available. And this is the tapping that is what produces music and art and theories of relativity and all the works of genius that we see and all the works of less than genius that we see is tapping this resource. And God is omnipresent. God is here. God is everywhere. That means I am here. I am everywhere. I'm not limited to this spot or to this time. God consciousness is my consciousness, and God is outside of space and time, so I'm not limited to this space or this time. Joel is here in this moment, in this time, in this place. And the other thing is that, God is eternal and therefore perfectly harmonious, because if there were disharmony in God, it would limit the eternality. So God is eternal. God never dies. Therefore, I never die. I am that consciousness. Death is not a possibility. So all the things that lead to death are not possibilities. And I have the 100% of all of these things, not the 1/5 billionth. And you have the 100% of all these things. And these are all true about you. None of you are limited in any way by education or power or any of these topics. This is what it means that God's consciousness is my consciousness and God's consciousness is your consciousness. And this is this is the basis of healing. We'll come back to that, but this is the place that we go to. The process of treatment is lifting our own consciousness to the point where it realizes some detail of what I've just been describing, so that can be realized. This, of course, is the hardest principle to get, and once you get it, you will have it all, but that's why we're starting with it and staying with it. So let's talk about this one. Yeah?
When you just went through that whole litany of stuff, and I've known you for a long time, and I've done this work for a long time, but for some reason I just wanted to say, and how do you know that? I mean, that's just what I want to say, so I'm saying it.
Well, either it is your experience or it isn't.
That's true.
It is.
But in the meantime, till it's your experience, you must believe what others tell you as it to be their experience.
Or not.
That's what I'm saying, or not. I mean, someone could be sitting in another room being told the exact opposite and believing that.
That's right. And that's why Robert always says, don't take me at my word, don't believe me. And don't believe me, work at it. See if you can have the realization. And that is what I'm saying, that's what the practice of healing or the practice of protective work or the practice of all these other things is about, and it's what we talked about last week as well, is that, our last class, these are things to experiment with. These are things to try and see if you can make them happen. Certainly if you become a great healer, this will be your experience. If you believe that Joel was a great healer, or that Jesus was a great healer, or Buddha, or etc., then you still have to accept whether this is the reason, the method, the technique by which they healed. But then you know that some such realization is possible. Originally, you have to, initially we're stuck with our intellect and our rational process, and the healing process is lifting ourselves out of that into this realization. The realization is entirely an intuitive thing, and you have it to the extent you have it. I have these realizations enough that I know they're true, and obviously I'm not nearly in touch with the full extent of any of the things I've recited, but I have some practical experience in all of them. I have demonstrated all of the things that I just mentioned sufficiently to myself to be comfortable here. I'm not telling you. I'm not giving you hearsay. I don't give hearsay. I tell you what I know through my own experience. Mike.
What is protective work?
We'll get to that. Protective work, though, really is there's spiritual healing is doing the work. Somebody has manifested some form of error, like sickness or lack or unemployment or something like that, and spiritual healing is to remove that appearance. Protective work is to have the same realization which you would have if you were doing the spiritual healing, but prior to the manifestation of the error, to prevent it happening. So, for instance, if you in fact understand these principles and live there, as Jesus would say, if you keep your mind stayed on God, all these other things will be added unto you. If you keep in this consciousness, then error will not manifest in your experience. That's the third principle that we're going to discuss today, to talk about error. But protective work is starting your day with the development of this consciousness so that you have a preventative mechanism working for you so that you don't swallow the lies.
Well, it's just about belief too, isn't it? I mean, when I first, over the last several years, I believe that you don't have to get sick no more. And as a result of that belief, I don't get sick as hardly ever.
The second principle is that matter is an expression of mind, and that matter is in fact what you believe. So yes, I mean the whole point of this thing is that your experience is the outpicturing of your current state of consciousness, and that means what you believe. That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's been my experience. I did it about 4 years ago. I got tired of getting colds and stuff, so because I didn't see the point,
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, well, I think I just, I don't acknowledge it as normal, in that it seems like to me you have to try to get one. And usually you get one when you hear about it, And like for the last 4 years, I haven't gotten sick, and I just don't get sick. If I get sick, it's because I ate bad or something. I eat the wrong stuff.
If you get sick, it's because you believe that eating bad can cause sickness.
Oh yeah.
You can throw that one out too, if you want to. Yeah, you don't need to get sick because you ate bad.
Mm.
That's another belief.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that when I eat like a lot of fried stuff, I get heartburn.
So you know that, and therefore you do.
So I don't have to get heartburn.
No.
See, I didn't know it.
Yeah. That's the point. Did you have something else, Dan?
Well, I was I'm trying to figure out how to go with what I want to say. What is the difference? And I know you're not to protective work yet, but you kind of started talking about that.
Sure. The whole thing is about all three, so
Okay.
go ahead. Mm-hmm.
What is the difference between knowing that and then using the little tricks to kind of know that? Like tricks meaning praying for things, positive things, good things, no sickness, that kind of stuff. Affirmation.
Okay.
I'm not going to get sick. I'm not going to get sick. I mean,
Let's go through these first three principles and get to the point of treatment, and then let's come back to that, okay?
okay.
Because they're
Does that make
very...
sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
I understand the question, but they're very different. And hopefully the result of this will be to make it clear what protective work is and isn't. And okay, so the first and fundamental, and I think only mystical principle is that God constitutes individual consciousness, that God is expressing itself as our own impersonal individual consciousness. Okay, the next principle, the second principle that's needed to be firmly grasped before we can do healing work is a metaphysical principle. And that principle is that mind is matter. Mind is, I'm going to say this 100 ways, well, as many as I can think of. Mind is the substance of matter. Matter has no substance other than mind. Matter has no reality except in mind. There is no matter outside of mind. This is a very difficult concept to grasp. It's a very simple concept if you grok it, and if you don't, it's very difficult to get because we are so thoroughly conditioned to think that matter is something that has its own existence independent of us out there somewhere and has a reality. And the best thing I can do to give you a glimpse of this, if you don't already have one, is to remind you of dreams. I love dreams because they give us such a clear example of this whole process. Every night we a dream. And during that dream, we may well be in let's just say we might be in a coffee shop, sitting at a table. And that table is solid. I mean, we in the dream can sit there and rap on the table and feel it. It has space, it has solidity, it has texture, it has color, it has all those attributes. And yet there's nothing going on there except what's inside your own personal dreaming mind. Interestingly enough, the space in which that table sat isn't anywhere when you wake up, and never was anywhere. There was never your brain didn't spread out table-sized in order to make room for that table in there. There was never any space in your brain for that table. There was never any wood in your brain, or any brown in your brain, or any grain in your brain, or roughness in your brain. I mean, the fact is that the space in which the table sat there and the time during which that table sat there and the table itself was all in your mind. It was all in mind. And so it's real clear that the mind is perfectly capable of doing that. It's what it does every night we dream. And the metaphysical principle, the principle that the metaphysical studies discovered, is that all of matter is just mind expressed, is just consciousness expressed in mind. Now the reason this is important is that, well, let me say what mind is. Let's talk about what is mind. Well, let's talk about, it's impossible to say what mind is. I'm reminded that Meg Johnson told me that she asked God, what is mind? And God said, you're looking at it. You're looking at it. Mind is the space you're looking at. Mind is all the stuff that you're looking at in this space. Mind is a hard word for us to use because there's so many, it has so much stuff in it. So let me define the word intellect as meaning these rational processes that we use, this thinking about stuff and figuring stuff out and solving equations and doing all that sort of stuff and being clever and being, bright monkeys. That's intellect. And we also have memory. That's the data bank. We have memories that we're conscious of memories that we aren't conscious of that can be brought to the surface through hypnosis and such like. And that's memory. So if I throw out the intellectual reasoning part of mind and I throw out the memory of it, then what's left? That's what we're talking about, because it really is mind. But most of us don't even realize that we have this function. Mind is really an apparatus, a tool which outpictures, manifests our beliefs, human belief, and our own personal beliefs as matter. And that's exactly what mind is. It's this tool, it's this apparatus, and it takes the content of your consciousness and manifests it as what we call matter. And that's the reason that some of the metaphysical churches got a good start, is that they could demonstrate this fact, and that's where some of the healing started, is from people realizing that it was just mind over matter. That's where the mind over matter expression started from. That's also why voodoo works, why black magic and white magic work, why all these strange things that shouldn't work, we think, but do, is because it's a matter of a strong mind forcing its belief to manifest. Yeah.
So why is it helpful for me to know that this is all an outpicturing of my belief system? If I know that, then how will that help me?
It would help you because it would hopefully indicate to you that you should change the content of your consciousness if you want your experience to change, rather than trying to change the experience. I said before that if I'm looking in a mirror at myself and I see something I don't like, suppose I'm looking in the mirror and I see an unruly eyebrow. The correct solution to that problem is not to try to pluck the eyebrow off that image in the mirror that I'm looking at. It doesn't work. I have to come to the source. The mirror outpictures, when I'm standing in front of the mirror outpictures me as that image. Okay, I can see what I look like in the mirror. And if I want to change what I'm seeing, I don't change the picture in the mirror, I don't paint over the mirror or do something like that, I have to change me. Similarly, mind is a tool, a God-given tool, which allows us to see what we believe. And the reason it's important to know that is that if you want to change, we see what we believe as our experience. And if we want our experience to change, we have to change the content of our consciousness. And we will get to this a little more in the third principle. But that's the reason, is that you have to understand, if you don't understand that matter and all of this stuff is an outpicturing of consciousness, then there's no point pursuing spiritual healing or mystical healing or any of that, because that's the basis of it. Ricky?
What's the difference?
Would you hit the light switches behind you, Teresa, on the wall? Thank you. Ricky?
What's the difference between waking dreams and sleeping dreams?
By waking dreams, you mean this experience we're having right now, or are you talking about fantasies?
It's like, in other words, the dreams, when we're sleeping, We're dreaming. Aren't we dreaming when we're awake then?
Yeah, Robert's answer to that question always was that this dreamer's a lot longer. This dream's a lot longer. No other dreaming. It's like a dream within a dream. But they're of the same nature. They're both happening entirely in mind. And for all you know, that you, suppose you're dreaming now of yourself asleep. Now, that you asleep may be having a dream. Okay? Now what's the difference between the dream of the one who's asleep in your dream and the dream you're having of that one who's asleep? Or the dream that you're really having of this one who's dreaming, etc. And it's just indirection, just nested levels. But the answer is no, there's no difference except apparent duration. And even that's a lie. It's apparent duration.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you too about the, to me it seems like, is it just a matter of my belief that I'm limited in time and space?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All that's here is God consciousness, omnipresent everywhere, expressed as individual consciousness. Impersonal individual consciousness. And that consciousness is eternal. So yes, the answer is yes, you are eternal. Yes, you were never born. Yes, you don't die. Jesus said, before Abraham was, I am. He even got the tenses right on the verbs. Before Abraham was, I am. Before Abraham was, in your time thinking, I am eternal. And this is eternality. Eternality has nothing to do with beginnings and endings. Time and space are inside of mind. And so is the Ricky who is limited in time and space. The Ricky who is limited in time and space is an outpicturing in mind, or a manifestation in mind, of that God consciousness which is expressed as you, that consciousness's current concept of itself. Good question. I haven't said that before. Yeah, that's and that consciousness which has the current concept which is being outpictured as this Ricky is the one that is eternal. Okay? That's the real. This is all dream. And this materially is the lie. This is the consciousness that we're working on getting past. Yes?
So this, you keep going up here like this consciousness, and and everything else is the outpicturing of, that's the Leelaa, right? It's got to be a game, got to be a happening.
Yeah, what's happening in mind is the Leelaa.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Explain it.
The whole thing, or? We talked earlier about Leelaa as this being all the play of the gods, or the play of God. The word Leelaa is a Sanskrit word which means the play of the gods. And what that really means is, the way I like to think of it, is if you think of a play, as in a theater type play, that God wrote, and God's directing, and God's doing all the acting, and God's the theater, and God's the stage, and God's the scenery, and God's the audience. That's play of the gods in that sense. To which one could possibly say, what's the point? There isn't one. That's why it's the play. It's all Leelaa. So it's in that sense. And so what she's saying is that, and what I'm saying is that the Leelaa is taking place in mind.
And that's what this is right now then.
You're looking at your mind. More precisely even, actually, you are looking at your mind because you are that consciousness. But you probably what you think is that the you, which is really within the mind, is looking at this. If you think you're sitting in that body looking at this, then that's part of the lie too.
Time and space, like just it's a construct of mind to attempt to grasp infinity, like just the infinity of consciousness. Mind's attempt to try and grasp the allness of it, to try and at least.
The fact is, I've been wondering.
Reference point, maybe.
I've been wondering about this a lot, and the only thing that's been given to me is that if you are going to have separation, you must have space. And space implies time. Time is just the other side of space. So if you are going to have separation, you're going to have space. Okay? Now, if you're going to be a God that wants to know what God is, it has to know what God isn't. And the only way to know what God isn't, since God is all one, is to introduce separation. And here came mind, and here came space, and here came time. And that is, I'm absolutely certain, pure nonsense.
Yeah.
But it's the best handle I can get on it.
Course in Miracle has a good description of what time is, and that's very similar to that. You know, it's just we need it because we can't grasp infinity, and we need it for the growth to show this separation of time.
If you're going to have an experience, there needs to be space and time. If you're going to think you're not God, there needs to be space and time. If you're going to experience not being God, there needs to be space and time.
But God doesn't need anything because God is everything. So what does God need? He doesn't need space, time, any.
That's why it's pure nonsense.
It's just, you know,
but if God wanted
to use words to explain things.
But if God wanted to know God.
Well, you're making that sound like I mean, why would God want to know God if God is God? There's nothing to know.
Or everything to know.
Well, same difference, right?
These are very easy things to say.
No, I understand that, but it's that kind of like, it's kind of that continual grasping.
Oh, you can't possibly.
I do it all the time too.
You can't possibly answer what the hell God's doing. You can't possibly answer that.
So no words.
But
I understand processes to get to the place, but words to try to explain the place almost, in a sense, to me, make it something so much less than it is.
Well, of course, to characterize anything limits it. But if we don't talk about it, we can't talk.
But you can talk about the processes of knowing it, which you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So what's your point?
I just want to know where the movement began. I heard that. I just love that. I mean, if all is God and God is everything and God knows all and it's all and you know, so who started this stuff?
Well,
you know,
and start doesn't make sense either because there was no et cetera, et cetera. So there's no sense to it.
But you know, I always go there because that's where my mind wants to go. It wants to know the whole end of it.
I had a question about dreams.
Uh-huh.
So I'm conscious, I'm dreaming, and when I sleep, my unconscious is dreaming, my subconscious. Is that, and how do I get my conscious to remember my subconscious dreams? Because when you're asleep.
Yeah, that's psychology. I mean, the fact is you do remember your dreams.
You do.
I remember my dreams.
Okay.
I assume you remember your dreams, or some of them. Perhaps you don't. Okay, I don't know.
Okay.
So let me hit the third principle, and that brings everything together that we need, and I think we're going to have another class in 2 weeks to discuss treatment itself. Let me bring in the third principle, and that sort of ties everything together. It's another metaphysical principle. It's specifically the one that Joel introduced that set the infinite away apart from the other metaphysical teachings that were in place at the time, and that's about the nature of error. And the principle, as I stated it, is error is in human consciousness, or error is based on human consciousness. A small detail about mind is that there's only one mind. 5 billion ports. Looking into it. 5 billion inputs and outputs, but there's only one mind. Okay? And the things which are being manifested, let's leave our own personal self out of it. Let's make ourselves an absolutely neutral observer. Let's suppose we could peep through a port and have no effect on what's inside the port at all, inside the mind at all. Okay, we're just looking into the bubble. And we don't have a consciousness at all. We're just peeking. Then what we're going to see in that bubble is essentially the consensus of the beliefs of the 5 billion. Because mind is manifesting the content of consciousness. And in the case of the 5 billion, or 4.99999 billion of them, the content of their consciousness is human consciousness. It's this agreed upon conditioning that we all have that says that I am limited in time and space, and that I am going to die in 60 years or 40 years, depending on what country you're in, or 70 years, and that stock markets do crash, and that astrology does say that I'll never find the right woman, or I'll live forever, or I've got a short lifeline, or all the conditioned beliefs that the 5 billion believe. The 5 billion people believe these beliefs, and they reassure each other that they're true, and they agree with each other that they're true, and pat each other on the back when they agree, and they teach their children that they're true, and they preach that they're true from the pulpits, and teach that they're true in school, and enforce that they're true in situation comedies, and swear that they're true in documentaries, and they go on, passing these beliefs around. Now imagine this wonderful thing. We've got 5 billion little radio stations. They're all broadcast, and it's all being done subliminally, by the way, if not out forthrightly. It's being done subliminally. There's these 5 billion little radio stations with a transmitter and a receiver. And I hear it from you and transmit it to you, and you pass it, and we're just passing this stuff around, The interesting thing is that that's all that's happening, is that we're just transmitting this stuff around, and there is no central station. There's no, I call it KFUC. KFUC has no source station. It's just the peripheral stations that are transmitting this around in circles. There's no source. There's also no target. It's absolutely impersonal. There's nobody creating this stuff. There's no source. There's no target. It's not aimed at you or me. It's just being passed around there. And I've got this little receiver tuned to KFUC, and I hear it, and I'm tuned in. Okay. Now the fact is that what we see when we're peeking through our little hole into the world, into mind, is what the 5 billion believe. And so we see, and what the 5 billion really believe in is more than one power. The 5 billion really believe that there are other powers than God, which is a reasonable belief if you're looking at the material world, which they're creating by this belief, rather than looking at the nature of God. So the 5 billion, yes?
Would those be the opposite, health and sickness and good and bad?
Duality is the N word for that, yes. For every coin there's a heads and a tails, yes. So that's exactly what it is. So they believe in powers of germs and powers of contagion and powers of astrology and powers of stock markets and yada, yada, yada. All these powers, and they believe in lack and abundance and health and sickness and supply and lack and employment and unemployment and on and on is what these people believe in. They believe in duality. They believe that there are other powers than God, and these powers, that there are laws, and science goes out and looks for these laws and finds them, and medicine finds laws of germs, and once in a while they find that a law of a germ, some law they had wasn't right. A classic case is that it was believed for years that colds were caused by people with wet feet sitting in drafts. And then science finally discovered a virus and said, no, it wasn't people sitting with wet feet in drafts that caused colds at all. And all the people that used to catch colds with wet feet sitting in drafts stopped catching colds that way. Now they catch their colds through viruses. But it really is true, that lots of people used to catch colds because they had wet feet and were sitting in drafts. And it's because they believed it. Now they believe in the virus, so now they're catching colds because of that belief. And they believe that penicillin will cure it. And so they break through it, except that some believe they're allergic to penicillin, so they break out in a rash.
If you lived in a place and you'd never heard of a cold, your whole culture had never, would you ever get a cold?
Absolutely. It's subliminal. This is being broadcast at a subconscious level.
So it doesn't matter if that belief system is part of your culture, your upbringing, or anything.
There's a great story
from every area.
There's a wonderful story about some anthropologists on an island who taught some monkeys to wash their food. Now, washing food has absolutely no survival value for a monkey. It was just something they taught. And found monkeys washing their food.
You just wouldn't call it that, but you would have the same. You would get that.
The monkeys on the second island got it that washing the food was in, and we said, God knows you want to look good, so they started washing their food,
Yeah. Okay.
No, we're talking about subconscious transmission. This is stuff that you believe. I mean, you catch colds long before you understand, long before you can articulate the word cold. Mm-hmm. Babies get cancer long before they can have any concept of that. And similarly,
their families have the concept, or their communities. That's what I meant.
Or the world. Somebody has it. Yeah. Probably you're much less likely to catch a cold in a community that doesn't catch colds.
Doesn't that kind of go against what you just told Eddie then? Because if Eddie is getting heartburn from his food because he believes he can get heartburn, what if he doesn't believe it? He can still get heartburn from his food, right?
No, if he doesn't believe it, he can't.
Well, what if I believe it and we're in the same room?
If he... Now...
I mean, that's what I mean.
All right. I see what the question is. The question is taking dominion over the content of my own consciousness. Now, I was talking about looking through my portal without any consciousness at all, looking and seeing what's happening in there. Now, while I can't change the world, I can't change the content of mind, because there's one of me against the 5 billion of them. What I can change is my experience, if I change the content of my consciousness. Okay? And as I said in another class that I was talking about, it is like, suppose my receiver has 2 stations, KFUC and KGOD. Now the problem is, I got a little dial there that here's KFUC and here's KGOD, and there's a spring on it. It keeps it over here. But if I turn really hard, I can turn it over to KGOD. If I let go for a second, it springs back to KFUC. But if I pull it over here to KGOD, then I'm hearing KGOD, okay? What I'm saying is that as I develop and eventually I can develop the muscle to the point that I break the spring, okay? Weaken the spring, weaken the spring, weaken the spring, weaken the spring, break the spring. But if I'm knowing who I am, really, if I'm not believing in those limitations, if I'm not believing that fried food causes heartburn, if I'm knowing that I'm God and that God is harmonious and eternal, and if I'm knowing that there is no other power than God, then, and now we're discussing treatment, which is the fourth topic on this thing, and knowing that there is no power other than God, then I have to know that fried food can't have any effect on me. And if I know that, if I realize that, then fried food will not have any effect on me.
And you could stretch right to alcohol and say the same thing.
We've demonstrated that in alcohol. We couldn't, any one of us, stop drinking. And we walked into a room where the consciousness knew that we could go today without drinking. And we
But
all...
I mean, believing that taking a drink, unless you've had the real, believing that if I take a drink I won't get drunk, might not be your experience. Because I believe it, or think I believe I'm saying. I've known too many infinite way people that went on that premise.
I hear your fear, and yet it is true that none of us is alcoholic.
Absolutely.
But what I said is if you realize, knowing isn't good enough.
Right.
Intellectual knowledge doesn't have anything to do with anything. Adding intellectual knowledge is that step which allows you to come to the point where perhaps you can have the realization. But if you really, if it's, one of my favorites is allergies. And one day it suddenly occurred to me how absurd it is for God to be allergic to God. And it struck me so clear, and it was so absurd that I burst out laughing. And my allergies stopped. Because I got it. Okay? But if I had figured out intellectually, well, I see, God is, and I'm sitting there with the intellectual knowledge, that doesn't do a thing. The mind is not out picturing the result of your latest intellectual endeavors. Mind is out picturing the content of your consciousness. In terms of script kid and fantasy land, mind is out picturing what your kid believes.
Well, it sounds like you've already said it, but if it was alcohol instead of fried food, then what?
No difference. Alcohol can't possibly have any power over me.
It may be a long time
I'm sorry.
between your knowing and your
You don't want to
believing in
knowing. You don't want to play with this, Ed.
Yeah.
You don't want to play with this. I don't. But
Sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
These all have to be individual realizations.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just because you know it, I can't know it just because you know it.
Right.
I have to have my own experience.
Your own experience, and you have to have it today. You have to have it now. It's not good enough to have once gotten the fact that fried food can't cause heartburn.
Right.
You have to know it while you're eating the fried food. I mean, it has to be the content of your consciousness while you're eating the fried food. Getting that in the morning, seeing that in the morning, and then going out amongst them, and yeah.
Parts that seem to be really, I don't want to say easy, but like, oh, I understand that. I totally understand that. And then there's other stuff where it's just,
Absolutely. You really have to go at this stuff. You have to get it point by point, and you have to address it on every detail until you get until you get lifted past it. I mean, if you've done,
And that's why you say just keep on reading the truth every day, because slowly it changes you over time.
Reading the truth every day is lifting the intellect, which is allowing you, it's weakening the spring, it's allowing you to, first of all, you have to get some of these theories.
Because you have to have the knowledge before you can have the experience.
It certainly helps. Some people can get struck with the experience and retrofit the knowledge, but that happens very infrequently. Mostly we have to get the knowledge before we will even pursue having the experience.
Of the different realizations?
Of the realizations, right. You will not seek the realization if you don't know it's there to look for it, is the point in general.
So that's why sometimes we can have a realization and it's so like simple here and then it's not here because we're not realized in this area.
Because we haven't dealt with that one yet, right. And it's, I mean, this thing is very complicated, and it's based on, previous experience in previous lifetimes and inclinations and all sorts of things, I mean, I was listening to a Joel tape the other night, and some of us can become very great healers, and some of us will become average healers, and some people have a affinity for healing, and some will have it for teaching, and some of it will have it for prophecy, and some will have it for service, and in all different areas that we will be expressing our God consciousness. So we can't expect all of us to master all these areas in this lifetime. And if we're healers, Joel had to encounter each disease that he met. I mean, he worked on cancer. He had 27 cancer patients until he finally broke it. And then he had a tuberculosis patient, and it took him 6 months. He kept her alive for 6 months, but then it took him 6 months to break it. He had to deal with them. Yeah.
So then the obvious question is, what is the path, or what do we do to get from the knowledge to the realization?
Right, and work with it is the answer. Immerse yourself in it. That's what I was saying earlier when I was saying that, where are we at time-wise? What I was saying earlier, the point is that practicing doing protective work, which we'll get into the details of, or practicing doing healing, attempting to do these things internally or with yourself, I mean, meeting your own apparent illnesses with healing consciousness, attempting to prevent apparent illnesses within yourself through protective work, doing this kind of work is the kind of thing you can do. That's the heavy equipment workout. The other thing you do is attend classes like this, which are classes in consciousness, which will tend to lift you. The other thing you do is do reading. You do the letter of the truth work, Joel calls it, where you read the letter of the truth. You read a few pages of a book that sounds spiritually, or listen to a tape, or both every day. You do the work every day to lift the intellect. And you do the meditation every day, which is reaching for the experience, opening yourself to the experience without any plan about what it will be, but getting quiet and listening for a revelation, for a grok. And what will happen is, and don't be disappointed if it doesn't happen right then. What often happens is I meditate and then fall asleep at night. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, I wake up and click. Oh, wow. And I get a whole new level of understanding on something, okay? I mean, it happened later or independently, but what you do is you develop a practice of reading, listening to tapes. You develop a practice of meditation. You develop a practice of hanging out with people that are doing the same kind of work with you rather than the people who have the other consciousness, because you choose the consciousness in which you immerse yourself. And whenever you have a chance to go hang out with somebody who's really high, Doris, Dulcie was down with Virginia Stevenson and, knocked her socks off how high Virginia was, and I spent 6 years with Robert. I went to see Robert 3 nights a week for 6 years. And one night was in Hollywood Hills at 7 o'clock at night, so I drove across downtown Los Angeles from Torrance every Thursday night at rush hour. And on Saturday afternoon, I drove to Encino, and on Sunday, I drove to Topanga Canyon Boulevard, and so I drove, 250 miles a week to go spend an hour with Robert, to just sit in the consciousness, and those are the 3 things I know: hang out with people that are on the path with you or ahead of you, and do the letter of truth work and meditate. But I'm suggesting that what I've found, since people have started to call me occasionally and ask for a little help in healing, is that it forces me to sit down and do the work right there on the spot. Do specifically the treatment work. And we will have another class in 2 weeks, and that will be about treatment, because there's not enough time really to even start that now. But doing the actual treatment work does me good. What I'm doing is I'm forced to sit down and recite these truths intellectually, remind myself of the truths, lift myself up, until I can get quiet and have a moment of recognition. And if I can have that moment of recognition, then maybe something will happen. And if I can't, then nothing will happen, and I walk away and maybe come back in half an hour and try again. In any event, it's like going to the gym. They're trying to curl this puppy, and once in a while maybe I do it, And then of course somebody puts another weight on it. But that's the game, and the work, the amount of work you do determines the speed of your success, unless you get a bolt. And the fact that Joel, I keep saying Joel got it all at once, right? But Joel did a lot of very hard work for 16 years or something like that before that moment happened. He really was trying to find God very hard, insanely, for 16 years before he had that bolt of clarity. Ricky?
Do you believe that you have to be physically present to gain that consciousness in somebody's presence? Or can you can gain it just by meditating, by lifting yourself up? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
I think because your communication without that space,
That's a very interesting question. I've thought about that a lot. The famous attraction, grab all the forces diminish with the square of the distance. So that, if you're twice as far away from the source as me, then you will get 1/4 the effect of it that I get. And if you're 3 times as far away, you'll get 1/9 the effect. But of course, this has nothing to do with consciousness, because consciousness is everywhere. So it doesn't seem like that has anything to do with that at all. But it still seems to be true. I mean, people that sit in the presence of the guru, up to a point, being in the presence makes a huge difference. And I know that through personal experience, and I have no idea why.
Again, that might be the belief in it.
Could well be my belief, but then if I was completely free of those beliefs, there would be no reason to sit in the presence of the guru at all. So, obviously the fact that I'm going to the guru across downtown Los Angeles on Thursday night at 6 o'clock indicates that I don't think I'm free of all my limitations, The physical experience is that, when I would go sit with Robert and I would leave, I could feel my skin buzzing. It felt just like it feels when I'm out on a motorcycle, the hairs on my arm and breeze, tickling. And I would hang out with Robert for an hour and I would leave there and my very skin buzzed from being in that presence. Now, I can't possibly give you a physiological reason or anything at all, but, being there was changing me. And it clearly did. Being in Rajneesh's presence, I was with Rajneesh for a month in the same commune, and nothing happened. Then I was with him at his feet for 5 minutes, and it blew me out. Absolutely cracked me open like a walnut with a hammer. So, yes, it makes a difference being close at first. Comes a time that doesn't make any difference at all. When I am that, then that's true.
Okay. God is consciousness. Consciousness is all there is, pretty much mind, right? And so, shouldn't, when you say Joel is here and Rajneesh is here or whoever, well, shouldn't we just know everything that, or or
Absolutely.
Joel knows, or anybody else knows, right?
Absolutely.
On some level.
Shouldn't we? Yes. That my point is that the opening point was that God is our consciousness, and therefore we have omniscience. But that's useless to you, except to the extent which that is realized. Now, you discover various aspects of your omniscience in very funny, practical ways. 30 years ago, when I was still an alcoholic and drinking regularly, I was also a very good system designer. And the way I designed computer systems, and the way I did that was I would gather all the information about the system that I could possibly gather, read all the data, get it all perked into my head, and go get drunk. And then 3 days later, I'd come back, and they'd start asking me, what are we going to do here? And I would start giving them answers. And, and I thought that I had some great subconscious network brain that was doing all this wonderful work while I was out there drinking, and in fact I had tapped an aspect of my omniscience in that particular area. Now, if you're a creative musician and making things happen and you don't know where it's coming from, or perhaps you do know where it's coming from, you have tapped that omniscience. All the songs that you don't write that come through your pen, things like that, is an example of that omniscience.
Which is all
of course, all the good ones. I'd be willing to bet.
Yeah. And the bad ones too, then, obviously.
Yeah, well, except that the bad ones may be done by the intellect, trying to take other people's stuff and hash it together differently. You can get caught up in your brain.
Isn't that like a matter of taste, or is what I would consider to be a bad one, and that someone else would consider that to be a good one?
Let's use the word creative and uncreative. I mean, you can intellectually hack together stuff out of other stuff and turn out something that would not be what I'm talking about.
That never makes it to the paper, because
Yeah, right, because
Yeah.
Sure, that's omniscience. That's tapping it.
Yeah.
Do you think that Mozart didn't come in with a little bit of tap on omniscience, writing full symphonies at 7?
Yeah.
Do you think that Van Gogh wasn't seeing things that we weren't seeing?
I just wanted to say something about Joel. He said on several tapes that he'd had 3 healings, 2 medically and 1 spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
And also in his earlier practitioner years, he had many failures, and he was unable to heal his first wife, who he loved dearly. And it almost threw him out of the healing ministry, because he just couldn't believe that he could heal all these other people, and he was not able to heal his own wife. So it's also that understanding that thy will be done is also present. And I had an experience with a friend of mine who called me with their dog had been bit by a rattlesnake. And when the call came through for help, she says, the vet says that the poison is traveling at such a rate, and something happened that was beyond me, and I heard, God cannot poison God.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew with everything in me that there was no difference in that snake and that dog, that they were one, and at that instant Goldie recovered.
Yeah.
And why that was given to me at that time, I don't know. And later on, I had a dog that was ill, and the healing did not transpire for my own animal. And I called every healer, and had everybody on it, and it did not happen. So there you are, and it threw me for a long time. And then I reread that about Joel and his wife, and I understood that, there's just steps we have to go through, and that's how we call each other. And there's many times I can step out of whatever is ailing me, and then there's times that I'm not, if it's to serve some silly purpose that unbeknownst to me, my mind can't figure out. And I went for years without colds because I just didn't believe and then every now and then I would just get it. And it was like, oh well, one thing I do know, a cold never kept me from going anywhere I wanted to be or doing anything I needed to be. The body, I was very ill about 3 weeks ago with this whatever that I don't get. And everywhere I needed to go, I got up and left, and then would go back. And I used that time to be still and be quiet. So I don't get into what's a healing and what isn't. A healing is me being where I'm supposed to be when I'm supposed to be there. And I just have to trust that. And also on the rattlesnake thing, I knew with everything in me there was no separation of me and a snake. And I was put through a process, and I hiked for years and for months during the prime rattlesnake season in Sedona over rocks and everything. I never even so much saw one. So because they had left my consciousness as a threat in any way. I don't know why that happened.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Is that, again, a realization of you being...
Yes, and the realization was given to me. I did not of my own self have it.
It came like right when...
Just like sobriety. Who knows why? Why was that a healing? I had many, many others. Why was that a healing? And someone else would go on and not get, a healing when they would call. And Joel got up to about an 80%. But in the beginning, he did not have that. It took him years. And as Lee said, the reason we have people call us is develop our knowing. It's all, my job is to clean up my belief when that call comes in, not theirs. The job of that call is for me to see where any of that belief is still in me, and I'm to clean it up here. As a result of it happening over there is none of my business. My business is what's your belief, lady? What's here? And then I call on God, and it's like, I also have the allergy one. God can't possibly be allergic to God.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we need to put a little closure on this now and get done on time. Thank you.